I'm Earl Brown, and welcome to another episode of Tell the Story, a Jazz Journeys production. It's been said throughout the ages that we're all on a journey to uncover and tell a story. A story that might be fresh in our minds, or one that has been left in stones, or lost with traces in sand. Maybe it's staring at us in mirrors as we try to find ourselves. Welcome to another episode of Tell the Story. I'm your host, Earl Brown. Visiting with us today is Tahina Marcette, the founder of Marcette Studios. What exactly is Marcette Studios, and what inspired you to go on this journey that you've been on for the past, do I have it correctly, 5 years now?
Yes, we're just at the mark, actually, yes, in January. So Marcette Studios is a creative wellness hub. And so it first started off as a mobile art studio. And the concept of it was I would host community arts events in my local community, which was Queens, New York. And I was able to bring art supplies and make it more accessible to those that were in my community. And so it's expanded over the last 5 years now at this point. And with that, we are able to provide programming to community orgs, to schools, nursing homes, a lot of community-based organizations. And so that's how, we've expanded to become the hub. And what made me decide to do it? Well, I had gotten to a point where I was just looking to impact people more, and I was looking to connect and engage with people more. And it was birthed out of COVID during that time. And so I was able to use that as a means of connecting people, distance at that time, of course, but keeping people connected, even, through the distance, but then also helping them to de-stress as well. And so that's where that initially started. And then we've kind of just continued to grow and expand.
Now, if I remember correctly, you were previously in corporate America. You'd had a successful career there, a few ups and downs, but what made you decide to leave corporate America altogether and have the courage to go on this journey?
Yes, so I was in corporate America, I would say, for about 7 years, different positions and roles within that time. And, I've gotten to this position as a facilities coordinator, and it was like so far away from who I am, like as a person and individual. And I know we don't have to, our jobs don't have to speak to who we are. But in that point in my life, I was about 25, 26, and just realized that, waking up every day, I didn't enjoy my job. I didn't actually, really like my life very much either, like of what it had turned out to or what it became. And so I had really thought that I would have to make the decision myself. And what I mean by that is like actually just quitting. But they ended up letting me go, which again, a blessing in disguise.
Sorry, did you say they let you go?
They did, yes. They ended up letting me go. And it wasn't because of like poor performance, because you would assume like, oh, like you don't like your job, so you're just going to do bad or whatever. It wasn't that. It was, they were like, downsizing or just, restructuring roles, whatever description it was they gave. But yeah, they ended up letting me go. And so that was actually a time that it allowed me to explore other roles. And I actually ended up working for an art therapy organization. And that was my first start into art therapy, music therapy, sensory therapy, and just seeing how art could be healing. The population that we were working with was special needs adults. So we worked within their group homes, and we got a chance to travel to the group homes a few times out of the week. And I was trained by the founder of that organization. And that really opened my eyes because I started to see how even someone who is considered special needs responds to music, responds to art, and really just changing their whole entire demeanor, changing their whole entire being. So you put on some music, you give them some art, they light up. They're delighted. They're so happy. And they may not be verbal, which a lot of them weren't, but they could still communicate. They could still connect with you. And that was something that was not only so touching and so powerful, it made me think about, well, what about, someone who can communicate, right? Or individuals who aren't considered special needs. How would that impact the regular, person every day? And so that was initially my first start into that. And I worked there for probably a year and a half, give or take. And then it was like part-time. So it wasn't like a, full-time job, but it was part-time, but it gave me the training, the start that I needed to take that step.
Did you think prior to that you could get the kind of response from children and young people that were in special needs that you ended up getting when you got involved with the program?
Yeah, I feel like I believed I did. I never attempted, right, to do that sort of thing, I think, beforehand. But I've worked with special needs children previously in other roles that I had done as well. And so that has started to become a specialty of mine. So working just with that type of population, even adults. So there was, the different ranges of age, but just that we had to know if they were verbal or nonverbal, lower functioning, things like that, that they don't respond typically as a regular person would. So I had the concept in my head, but I never actually did it. And then I got to see someone else who was doing it. And so it was like, oh, wow, this could be a thing, this could be done. And the area that we were in, I saw the options that were afforded to them. And I'm like, well, what about us? And us, our people. And so that was kind of, I guess, the thought process afterwards. But then I'm like, ooh, what could this become if you start making this more accessible to everyone? And not just because this one organization has funding for this one group home, or, it was a set of group homes, but considering what that looks globally, right? What does that start to look like when you have this programming in every community center, or you have it in your homes, right? Because, at that time it was COVID, everything was closed and shut down and stuff once I launched. But thinking about that, if you have more access, it doesn't automatically mean you become better, but it's also just thinking about what that looks like for my community. Because I knew what it was like growing up, right? And what that meant to have, and knowing that there are some areas that have more access than others. So I'm like, okay, how do I start making this more accessible to the people that need it the most?
So here you are, you're working for an arts organization, you're having really positive success with it, or you're having great success with it. Mm-hmm. And then you decide that I think I'm going to create my own studio, Marcette Studios. Mm-hmm. What inspired you to, again, now you're already having success.
Sure.
So did you discover at that point that you're an entrepreneur, or what guided you? What motivated you?
Well, to answer the last question first, I always knew I would be an entrepreneur since I was younger. Yeah, probably about my teens. I didn't know that. I didn't know what it was going to be, or how that would, take vision, or how that would, expand. But I did always know that, because I just always felt like I wanted, I saw how the systems were built. I saw how things were growing up. And I'm like, well, if I can't change the systems, I'm going to build my own. And I've always kind of had that mentality. So, and so that's what I've just kind of learned to do over time. If I see something and it's broken, I might not be able to fix the broken system, but I'm going to create this one and bring people to it. Mm-hmm. And so with Marcette Studios, I originally started off as a virtual assistant. That was my first entrepreneurial endeavor that I did for myself. And that was actually a year or two after that, after I was doing the art therapy. And then I went and started this virtual assistant business.
Now, so the virtual assistant program was through Marcette Studios.
Yeah, that was the first, it wasn't iteration, because it didn't have anything to do with art or music or anything, but it was just the first concept of what entrepreneurship may look like for me, within my business. So yes, and it's actually still technically a part of Marcette Studios. It just wasn't relevant to this, but yeah.
So how did you do that virtually?
Yeah. So, it's really interesting. Now VAs are so popular, right? Virtual assistants are extremely popular. When I started my VA services, that was about 2017. And that was before people knew what that was. And that was also before people understood what the significance of it was for their business or for themselves. How did it start? So I will say that God gave me a vision, basically, and I just went with it. But it was slow building, like I said, because a lot of stuff that I've started or I might have had the innovation for, it didn't become popular until years later. So even the same thing with my mobile art studio, no one knew what a paint and sip was, right? And now everyone knows, right? It's common, but I always started like at least 5 years before it becomes extremely popular or it takes off. And that's just the thing. God will give me something by way of innovation. And he's like, hey, start it now. It'll be relevant a few years from now.
By the way, I got to ask you this. I hear the expression paint and sip or sip and paint.
Yes.
Is there really a difference? Or which one? What is the proper approach or the proper name?
So typically people refer to it as paint and sip. I think they're just interchangeable, but I always like to joke about it by saying like paint and sip, the emphasis is on painting. And then when you say sip and paint, then the emphasis is on sipping. But, but that's just a fun thing that I go with. But I think they're just interchangeable. The concept of having the painting and sipping together and, making it a fun event.
Now, when I hear of paint and sip, I'm thinking of painting and sipping on cocktails or wine, a glass of wine, or something to that effect. How were you able to take that concept, of course not sipping on wine, to the young people and the schools and the young people?
Sure. So if it's a kids event, a youth event, or something like that, more focused in that way, we might have a pizza and paint where they have the food and painting, or typically what I will explain it as is expressive art. If it's for the schools, social emotional learning. Again, if it's for the schools, or I would even say a community art event. There's a lot of language that you can put to it that will make it sound different, I guess, or so that, you're not emphasizing sipping, but they can also sip on Capri Sun, right? They can also sip on apple juice. So that's okay. But of course, we're not saying, a paint and sip for, a kid's event. Sure. Yeah. So it would be like a Capri Sun and paint, right? Or something like that. But a similar concept. And most times what I've noticed too, when working with kids, they like to do their own thing. So even when, so we know typically when you have a paint and sip event, it's a 2-hour or 3-hour guided painting session. And so you are guiding the adults or teens or whoever on how to complete the painting. And so for kids, they want to do their own painting. And so loosely guided is what I like to call it. But when I'm teaching kids, I love to let them do their own thing, right? Because oftentimes they have a story that goes with it. Oftentimes they have their own vision, and we don't want to stifle that. We want them to be able to speak in those moments because they might not have had a chance any other time or any time in their day to be able to do that. So we want them to have that expression. But it's also the same thing I would say for teens or adults. Like oftentimes as adults, we don't give ourselves that space either, right? So these spaces that I've been creating that allows people to express themselves, it has shown up in such an impactful way because after the event is over, people will come to me and share their either story or just share something they got out of the event. And then that's how I know okay, it's doing what it's supposed to do.
You've been listening to episode 1 of Tell the Story with Tahina Marcette from Marcette Studios. But wait, there's much more to the story. That's coming up in episode 2. In the meantime, be sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that like button and tell a friend to do the same. By the way, if you like what you're seeing and hearing, Be sure to check out some of our other podcasts on this channel.